are happening in the background. So we, as I mentioned, we are putting together a report on post-COVID futures. And one of the big questions that we are confronted with is technology and its ability to reinvent a South Asian future. South Asia, as we know, is the least integrated region in the world, etc. But tech is a story that we're hearing positively about from India and Pakistan, not bilaterally, but separately. I understand Pakistan is generating what, 4 billion in terms of GDP, $4 billion in exports of tech services and goods. But I'd like today's conversation to maybe talk about the potential of tech to bring together South Asia, but also how it brings Pakistan together. Its various sectors of governance, its people, etc. We have all heard about the damages that social media has caused, that tech has caused, and of course the jury is still out on whether the government is anywhere close to making a comprehensive set of laws or even govern the space effectively. But not to get into the negatives so much, I'd like to start straight up with Nighat, who's been leading this front on the human rights front as well. Nighat, tell us what you think. Can tech lead a positive way out of for Pakistan and for South Asia?
So we are just talking about positives?
No, negatives as well.
Well, I think, like coming to younger people, I feel that technology has done so many miracles in the last few years, especially when it comes to South Asia. But I also feel that as a digital rights activist, of course, I'll be talking about the rights when it comes to technology and innovation, and I feel that there is so much conversation around innovation, startup culture. I mean, so much money has been put into this. In like making incubation centers. There's so many incubation centers that I don't even remember how many we have in Pakistan. And then this whole trend started in the last few years, and Mubariz can also add into this, that in so many like at the government level but also private level incubation centers and startups ko kis tarike se train kare. But one thing that I see as a digital rights activist, a complete disassociation and detachment from the like human rights when it comes to technology, and that's where we see how different powerful actors are taking advantage of it. We like when it comes to the laws and regulations and rules and directives that have been introduced by not just Pakistani government but also our neighboring country India, and I mean I can safely say Nepal and Bangladesh. Those have maybe not direct impact on how technology and innovation is getting, like it's being progressed or getting advancement in these countries, but also I feel that it has really negative impact in the long term, and there is no the ecosystem is very detached from each other. Like the startups, they are just like for instance, there's one example of VPN directive, and we had a conversation around this. So it's not just VPN is not just activists and human rights defenders and journalists use it. I mean, startups and banks and like everyone uses it. But the regulator is just now trying to ban this and not banning this, but asking people to register. But the directive is not just clear. So I think where we feel that we are detached and we are not just together in this ecosystem, because the technology, the people in the technology sector will just abide by what the regulator and authority will say. And then there is other side, which is, the human rights people or digital rights activists who are saying stuff, who are screaming, who are saying that these things are just damaging the entire ecosystem. But I feel that these are the developments that have been taking place. But on the other hand, I think that COVID was, it of course it's a global health emergency. People moved on to online spaces and started using technology, but also it revealed ingrained in inequality in the society as well. So we saw in our country who has access to internet and who have not. And that conversation was going on for the last couple of years. But when it comes to online classes and students who were in the main urban areas or in the big towns and were studying, when they had to go back to their tribal areas or far-flung areas or rural areas, that's where they found they cannot be part of this online class culture because you don't have internet. So either the internet is not there because of the infrastructural issues, but then there is another aspect of this where there is like shutdowns by the government, internet shutdowns and mobile network shutdowns. So I think they're like opportunities. There were good things that have happened, but I'm really worried about the draconian nature of the regulations, and not just the regulations but also rules which don't have the statutory power and directives, ad hoc directives. तो जिस अथॉरिटी की जब मर्जी आती है वो अपनी मर्जी से like पैमरा का दिल करता तो वो कर देता है, पीटीए का करता तो वो. So like I think this is another aspect that we really need to look into कि कौन से challenges और hindrances हैं जो कि आपके टेक सेक्टर को बढ़ने नहीं दे रहे पाकिस्तान में. So I'll just stop it there.
Thanks, Nighat, for that. And I think you really hit the nail on the head by pointing towards this digital divide where, the marginalized and the disenfranchised were forced back to their villages or other, their homes, and found that because they don't have a digital franchise out there, they are locked out of technology, out of governance, out of education and healthcare. And this was very much something that we learned because of the COVID experience. Mubariz, if you'd like to come in and speak about this digital divide a little bit, because I think this really comes at the heart of whether Pakistan can integrate and whether South Asia can integrate.
Well, no, I think great insights by Nighat there, and especially she shared her experience when it came to a bit of the draconian, I think is the only word I would say, regulation around VPN and just trying to curb speech. I think that issue is broader than just startups and businesses, right? Because I generally feel that Pakistanis, or actually most people in the world, do not really understand their fundamental right of privacy. And this whole "I've got nothing to hide" is a lack of understanding of what all you can stand to lose by your information being available to the world, right? I think वहाँ पे उस aspect पे काम करना जरूरी है. But let's coming to the startup sector. It's absolutely correct that there are a lot of people and different players in it. There are people such as incubators, accelerators in it, and dime a dozen, and there are startups coming out of everywhere. But again, it's really difficult to expect such businesses to always take an activist stand, which I think the stand that we should be taking as individuals or citizens of Pakistan as well. It's not just limited to those businesses. So, for example, अगर मैं online टिंडे बेच रहा हूँ या लौकी बेच रहा हूँ, it's while I'm using the internet to do it, it's still my business is not heavily reliant. It's not a entirely purely digital business, and I think that's where we have to draw a distinction between what a technology company is and what a startup is. When we typically understand a startup, it's a company that has high growth potential, which would prioritize growth over everything else, and maybe provide a return to an exponential return to the investors in the next 4 or 5 years. A technology company could also be a startup, but the business that they're in is pure tech, right? So if I'm talking about Zoom is a pure technology company. Most startups in Pakistan are not technology companies. They are technology enabled. They use technology to get to a certain point, and I think that's how we need to view technology in this all. Technology is the enabler. It's a means to an end, and it's not the end right now. So all these businesses that are being built will use technology, but they're not entirely technology on their own. And technology also changes, right? There was a time when Spoon was technology, and it's not anymore. That's why when we talk about basic internet right now, or say e-commerce right now, I don't think that's a tech company. E-commerce is right now, I think it's not technologically super advanced. It's not technology working on a frontier. It's literally just giving you the ability to conduct transactions online. again, the divide which Nighat speaks about, and correctly, what we need to understand is that for most Pakistanis, internet is what, 4 years old or 5 years old? Like the rural Pakistanis, when we got 3G and when we started distributing internet all over Pakistan, that's how old internet is. So it will take time for this to spread. As the phones become cheaper, as we have more functionalities for dumb phones or like non-smartphones or feature phones as they're called, I think this will increase. And as the adoption of technology increases, it is imperative that the rails of technology, i.e., the surrounding rights, your right to privacy, your right to conduct transactions online, your right to pay digitally, they will all need to be protected and furthered. And that's the only way Pakistan can have a standing in or be integrated through technology in the region.
I want to come to the idea, the discussion on protections, etc., in just a bit, but I want to like linger on this a little more. Are we generating that volume of transactions? Of what I know, the startup culture went bust a couple of years ago, and it was discovered that didn't really live up to its potential. But are we generating the kind of online transactions that we hope technology will help us with in years to come? I'd like Anoosha to come in on this and let us know about the ecosystem as she sees it, and then of course the whole nature of e-commerce.
Sorry, should I?
Please go ahead.
Do you want me to answer that? Right. So, do you want me to talk about e-commerce specifically, or just give like a general
Any particular
overview
order,
of
any particular
what I
order as you
think?
like.
So as far as the theme of our session is concerned about technology and whether where it's headed and whether we're benefiting from it, or we're actually do we have enough accountability mechanisms in place. So keeping that in mind, जहाँ तक e-commerce की बात है या cross border trade, as far as we're concerned, so Pakistan, you see, it's a common law country, which means that we don't have a codified book where जहाँ सारे laws लिखे होते हैं. So we tend to rely a lot on judicial decisions. We tend to leave a lot of gray areas to the bureaucracy or to the policymakers, to the people in government, the executive essentially. So as far as common law countries are concerned, studies have shown that they don't they need additional assistance in terms of technology-enabled platforms or new laws in order to have a proper structure or ecosystem in order to regulate these cross-border transactions and e-commerce. जिसके लिए ये ज़रूरी है ये चीज़ें करनी, especially when it comes to consumer protection. जहाँ तक हमारी volume of trade की बात है, I would just say that we're not doing as well as the government would like to say. हमारी exports इतनी ज़्यादा नहीं है जितनी होनी चाहिए. Of course, the GDP and GNP and our balance of payments shows that. फिर ये चीज़ आ जाती है कि our sellers are maybe not as protected as people in other countries, because once they transact online, there's no way of knowing maybe who the seller is, or in case something goes wrong, what's the dispute resolution mechanism. So we don't have any online dispute resolution mechanisms as well, जो कि बहुत सारी countries ने adopt कर ली हैं. If you're using AliExpress, let's say, they have an immediate redressal mechanism that resolves your complaints within 24 hours maybe. इसी तरह data protection और privacy की जहाँ तक बात आती है, our sellers are maybe not as familiar with them as they should be. especially when they're dealing with customers who are based in the European Union or the US, for example. So as far as e-commerce is concerned, there's a lot left to be desired, and um, at the end of the day, it's ultimately about having accountability mechanisms that could ensure that you have what it takes to conduct commercial transactions online. So as far as legal tech in the general sense is concerned, उसमें यही है कि our judiciary has started adopting e-courts and e-justice. We're helping them sort of digitalize them, bring them into the 21st century. It's very slow, but we're getting there. Problem, as Nighat pointed out earlier, the problem is this disconnect between the ecosystem. So when our judiciary and when our lawyers, they need like a tech assessment or whether they should be adopting any technologies and whatnot, the first person they would go to is a technologist or maybe a tech company, or maybe somebody already engaged by the government in different initiatives, which is, I don't think, the best way to go about it, because यहाँ पे you need legal technologists who understand both ecosystems essentially and can bridge that divide and bridge that gap and ultimately identify the gaps and then the consequent solutions that we can use to take this forward. So I agree with the point that there's a huge disconnect. As far as the internet is concerned, obviously it's very new. जिस तरह अभी we're having this online interaction, a lot of people are not able to do that. So according to our telecom companies, our internet penetration rate is only about 32%, which means that only 32% of the population may have access to the internet. बाकी जो लोग हैं, they still remain, they may have smartphones, they may have like a telephone connection, but they're still without the internet, or at least a stable internet connection. So which is, I think, a huge problem moving forward when they're trying to access a lot of things online. So yeah.
Can I also add to the e-commerce and the online transaction bit that you asked earlier?
Please do.
Yeah, so basically,
Please do.
one of the fundamental challenges to e-commerce and conducting transactions digitally is the lack of a digital payment infrastructure, right? Even today, Pakistan has around 1 million credit cards, around similar amount of debit cards, not unique, same people included. We have around 50 to 60,000 POS machines where you swipe the debit or credit card. Compare the POS machines to Iran, which has 3.4 million, and Turkey, which has 3.8 million POS machines, जहाँ पे आप पान सिगरेट से लेके बड़े रेस्टोरेंट हर जगह जाके आप electronically pay कर सकते हैं, right? If I can't pay digitally, and if I'm actually and the problem why this exists is because I'm actually disincentivized to pay online. I'm disincentivized to make a digital payment because जो बंदा मुझसे एक टैक्स नहीं चार्ज कर रहा, अब वो कहेगा अगर आप मुझे रिकॉर्ड पे पे कर रहे हैं तो let me just add my sales tax, my services tax, or whatever that I was stealing before, but now that you're paying me online, might as well take that. There's a restaurant in Karachi, very famous, Kolachi के नाम से, all the way in phase 8, जहाँ पे आपकी मतलब कुछ भी नहीं है, सिर्फ वो रेस्टोरेंट ही है. You cannot pay by card there. They have installed an ATM machine, but not a POS machine, and that should tell you how difficult it is to actually do businesses that are transparent and recording all transactions, because your customers don't want it either. So what we need is more of an incentivization structure to force the businesses and the customers to pay online or pay through digital means, which I would say would be the first step forward. I think the Punjab government has taken an initiative where if you pay by card, you pay less services tax or SST, is my understanding.
Then you only pay 5%, but the businesses haven't adopted that yet.
There you go. Yeah,
because they don't want to.
Because they're paying 0%, right? So they're like 5% bhi kyun dein? So that's why they're not doing it, because wo under the radar ka wo chal raha hai, and even the people who come and check them are just पूरा एक system चल रहा है, and that's how you break the system. But essentially, it'll be the customers who will have to force through, right? Who will have to force these reforms through and say, okay, no, I'll pay you by card and charge that 5% and show me the receipt. And the world over this has been done. This not we're not facing a unique problem here. ये पूरी दुनिया में हो चुका है, लोगों ने fix भी कर दिया. It requires a little bit of will and little bit of intentionality to fix this.
Thank you for those insights. Nighat had to join us because had to leave us because she was handling that scenario in the background. Glad that we have Sadaf and Usama with us as well. Sadaf, I'd like to come to you and with perspectives from both Anoosha and Mubariz. So from the demand side, or say the citizens of Pakistan may be able to innovate this landscape as much as they can. But the government still seems to be finding its feet. There have been examples given of the Punjab government, federal government. Through the COVID emergency, we also launched this SAS program that made use of tech as much as it could. We also got into education governance, and there were experiments there, etc. So the government might not be fully at home with using tech or governing tech, or as Anoosha said, finding the legal kind of cover via technologists. What, in your view, is the government's wherewithal on tech and whether it can be a leader in this domain? Sadaf is not with us anymore. Osama, would you like to take that question?
Hi Salman, hi Mubariz and Anoosha. Sure. So your question is about government and tech. I heard that, but could you repeat the rest of
The government's ability to match its citizens in doing digital innovation, in being able to provide digital solutions, in being able to create governance in the domains it is interested in. And the examples I gave were SaaS, social protection, education. But is the government really a leader here? Do we see it as one?
Yeah, that's a complex question, and I think with BISB and SAS, we've seen that they give out cards, so specific ATM or debit cards that you could use to access your funds. And this is something that I saw in post-military operations in FATA and SWAT also, because so for all the IDPs, they created these cards, and at ATMs you would have like 1,000 SWAT, and at the ATM there's an older man who said that I don't know how to use this, can you help me? And I had to help him use the ATM to access the funds that government was giving to people who'd been affected by the military operations there. So we've seen that sort of like first hand use of digital payments, so to speak, or say like ATMs, cards, because of government services, right? And at the same time, I think what I'm also reminded of now is around 2010-11, there was this bureaucrat called Bhatti who introduced the Jung model of governance, then which then Shahbaz Sharif made the Punjab model of governance, which was a very interesting model. I think I wrote about this as well back then. So what they were doing was that for every government transaction that you made, so, for example, you're going to a land registry and you're, transferring land, or any government transaction, car token tax payment or whatever. You note down, you give them your cell phone number, and once you leave the office, you get a call from a call center, from a government call center with the chief minister's voice recording, asking you if you were paying any bribe, or what was the amount of money that you were charged, to ensure that petty corruption is not taking place. So that's another use of technology that the government, made at the lower basic level of governance in order to tackle petty corruption. And I think, it's a good model, and it was also covered by the economists, and then the post, research of it showed that the corruption went down. So we've seen the government employ, digital innovation in some ways. But at the same time, I think there haven't been sufficient efforts to get people to open bank accounts or to use technology or internet for payments. And I'll give you an example of a family I know in Karachi, and so it's my friend's family, and my friend's father opened a bank account for the first time 2 years ago. All their life they haven't had a bank account because there's such a distrust of the banking system, but also the government, and they don't want to pay tax. If they do pay tax, they feel that there's not enough for return for citizens. Even if they are paying tax, what are they getting in return? And because of that, a lot of people don't want to pay it, right? Especially the business community that ends up making a lot of money. So if you went to their house, you'd have like crores of rupees lying in cash. So I think that distrust in the state and in the banking system is also very, very strong, and that's something that's going to take a lot of work to be bridged.
That's a tough one because if there is such a wide gap between the citizens and tech, and of course, I'd imagine from what you're saying, these are people who are empowered, who have resources, but choose to stay outside the system. Um, Anoosha, do you think there are comparisons elsewhere in South Asia with this kind of dynamic and where other governments or other societies might have been able to bridge this gap more effectively? And of course, I'm asking you as well as Mubariz, can we do a comparison with other contexts that have been able to bridge this gap?
Right. So as far as being a lawyer is concerned, I'm more confident about using technology because I know at the back of my head, ultimately, if things go wrong, I know how I can protect myself ultimately by going to court or by having some sort of, accountability mechanism that I could eventually. And I feel like I would be in a very privileged position to say that I have the patience and the time and the energy to see the complaint through till the end. But a lot of people do not have that kind of the privilege or luxury or trust for the government, or they just simply are not aware that there do exist accountability mechanism and dispute resolution mechanisms which they can use in order to be able to use all the technological features more confidently. So as far as other countries are concerned, um, the let's take the example of the European Union, for example. Uh, the EU not only protects its citizens' data and privacy through its laws that apply across its member states, but one of their laws, the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, it also applies to sellers in other countries beyond the European Union itself, which makes it compulsory on them to protect the data of the customers who are based in the European Union. Because so unki reach, they have more reach like that. We do not have the capacity to do that yet because we don't have that kind of international, clout. As far as the European Union and the US is concerned, they have a lot of agreements between them as well, which the courts keep revising from time to time. So there's no settled law as yet. As far as China is concerned, they have a more authoritarian regime. Whatever the government says goes, and all the people have to follow it. And that's why they have been able to impose a lot of things, across the board without getting any dissent in return. But what Pakistan seems to have done is they should have adopted all the good things from these countries, which could have made adoption of technology or the use of it more mainstream. What Pakistan seems to have done is they've adopted these the stricter, the more authoritative ones, where they seem to be more pro ban than pro regulation. बैन ज्यादा लग रहे हैं, ओवर रेगुलेशन ज्यादा हो रही है, और जो रेगुलेशन और अकाउंटेबिलिटी, लाइक it's not a healthy balance at the moment. फिर यही है कि as far as South Asia is concerned, as far as I can speak more comfortably about the legal sector. वहाँ पे legal sector यही है कि they since they have such a large population, they've managed to adopt the e-court system and the e-justice system more more willingly, I would say. Pakistan, maybe there are a lot of mistrust, Tony, but there's a lot of mistrust about not the government but about technology कि ये हम किस तरह use करेंगे, हमारी jobs replace हो जाएंगी. So a lot of lawyers fear that once the e-court system gets into place, they might be replaced. That tech would take over their jobs. So lawyers की तरफ से there's a lot of resistance at the moment, I would say. Then Bangladesh is, I think, doing well as far as a lot of embracing of technology is concerned, but they're a very small country. They adopted, Mubariz could probably, expand on this. So the Grameen Bank model that they're following and the microfinance model, ultimately it does go online, and a lot of people are benefiting from it, and that originated from Bangladesh. So they're they seem to be doing well on the fintech side. Maybe not like on the technical aspects, but they have the right concepts in place, I would say. फिर इसी तरह अगर developing countries की बात की जाए तो we don't give a lot of credit to African nations, especially Nigeria. They are doing really well on adopting technology because that's because the UN has been involved in a lot of their initiatives. So jahan pe where there's extreme poverty or famine or like a drought, so the UN has been able to use technology tools such as blockchain in order to provide aid to individuals when their governments are not assisting them with giving them legal documents or giving them legal identity, or not helping the migrants or the refugees. Wahan pe international organizations like the UN, they've been able to penetrate the tech market and do well in that regard. So it's there's no set law, there's no set model. It's I think it's really on a countrywide basis about how technology is being adopted and what successes it is having.
Yeah, Mubariz, I'd like to come to you. I think Anoosha has been able to answer that, give examples from other contexts quite well, as well as interventions that have helped the legal sector. If you could also maybe point out best practices that Pakistan can adopt from other places, or which it is already on its way to adopting, if you could reflect on that, and then I'd like to come to Sadaf.
Sure. So when we talk about use of technology in governance and regulation, again, technology is not the end; it's a means to an end, right? It's very important to see what are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. For example, I think Usama spoke about corruption and transparency. If you want to end corruption, how does corruption happen, right? Corruption happens when there's lack of transparency, number one, where there's no one checking your record or can't check your record, which you can falsify. Number two, corruption happens when there is discretion given to a human being, right? Now, the human being in question, if he has the discretion to whether delay a certain thing by any time or inordinate time that they want, they could then charge that person to not delay that thing or not delay that process or not delay that application. Simple like a building control ke paas jaye, aap ek application leke, they can find out as many problems as they want because they have a lot of discretion around it. So in order to exercise the discretion a certain way, they expect money for it and they expect bribes for it. If you talk about using technology to end this, it's probably one of the best use cases, right? You need to build systems where the discretion is limited, and you need to build systems where the process is transparent and the decision making is transparent, and people's reasons, rationale, and it's all recorded. So that way you can have a consistent track record and you can track those things. So when we again, it's not that एक ऐप बना दी और सारे मसले खत्म हो गए. It's not like कि मैंने एक हेल्पलाइन बना दी सारे मसले खत्म हो गए. It's about focusing, being laser focused on the outcome, and then using whatever tools are available to you, whether they're technologically so advanced, whether it's AI which you can use to make those government decisions instead of that person, or whether you simply have a camera there recording all conversations that say a driving license wala jo police officer hai, whenever he's giving out driving license, that they do. That alone would add the transparency and make the person accountable, because traceable. So again, we need to be outcome focused and use whatever tools are available in our arsenal to achieve that outcome. When we talk about policy, policy is about incentivizing behavior and disincentivizing behavior, right? You know how Charlie Munger says, he says, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome, right? If you're going to incentivize a certain kind of behavior, the outcome is going to be very like it's pretty obvious. So to give you an example, when we talk about an undocumented economy in Pakistan, what 2.3 million tax filers, 2.4 million tax filers out of 200 something million people. What we're talking about essentially is a system where doing a business, a documented business, is much harder than doing an undocumented business. And I'll give you a very small example. When you go to register your FPR NTN for an association of person, which is you and a friend starting a business in a partnership or something, they ask you for proof of business address. Proof of business address क्या है? Proof of business address है आपका बिजली का बिल जो आपके नाम पे आया उस जगह पे, भाई मेरे नाम पे नहीं है, जो किराएदार है उसके नाम पे, अच्छा तो अपना रेंट एग्रीमेंट दिखा दें. Now, if you are working from home, or if you're a business that is predominantly based from home and not really in an office, वगैरह, your bijli ka name is coming in your father's name. Then you go and take out your property papers and show them, and the father allowing you that he is the owner, and so you have to build that chain. Why the hell is this information important? Someone is coming to tell you how much money they're making and want to give you tax, and this is where they're stuck. And I know many people who get stuck here, right? They just go to a friend and make a fake tenancy agreement कि हाँ मैं तुम्हारे ऑफिस में बैठता हूँ और वहाँ जाके दे देते हैं, and then that's also becomes an issue. So you don't need rocket science, you don't need this most sophisticated technology, and what you need is a little bit of empathy, is people who are government needs to be more focused with citizen experience, and businesses call it user experience, but let's just call it citizen experience in the government thing. You need to be laser focused on how can I make this person's interaction with me, the government, or any of my departments so smooth that he pushes for the objectives that I want him to do, right? So if I make it so difficult for you to start a or a documented business, you will not do it. You would rather do, everyone's getting paid in cash. Even a small business has to withhold tax and then file it on a monthly basis. People would much rather do a cash business on the side and just keep that money. And then obviously they can't tell you at all, even if they want to pay tax, they just can't because they've never kept that record. So it's about that empathy. It's about changing that mindset, and it's about facilitating people. And technology, the best part about technology is that it can make these processes much easier for the citizens, right? Singapore tax filing. They get a tax return, pre-filled tax return to them, and then they add their bit, they edit it, whatever's not right and all. But based on their previous return, based on the account statements and all, you get a pre-filled return to you. Now, use technology to make it easier for people to comply. Do not expect people to first go get an affidavit from place A, then travel 5 kilometers to go to another place, फिर जाके एक सरकारी दफ्तर से एक चीज attest करा दें. These processes, you don't need them. You can fix them and you can do without them. So that's the whole point. It's again, technology is just a means, and in when you talk about regulation and governance, it needs to be a means to a superior citizen experience rather than anything else. And I think that would just generally help compliance a lot.
Thank you for that very insightful intervention. I'd like to come to Sadaf and change tack slightly. Sadaf, and I hope you've been messaging on the side. We are hearing from, all right, we're hearing from everybody about a sclerotic state that is unable to provide technology or facilitate it for its citizens, like Mubariz is saying. At the citizen level, has technology led to greater innovation or integration, or has it led to increased strife and breakdown? And I ask this with a view that we're looking at technology as a solution. for South Asia to better achieve its potential, for society as well as government? What would your view be?
So I think it's a bit of both. I don't think we can take a very detrimentalistic view and say technology has led to either progress or obstructed progress in any way. I think holistically, if I look at it, there have been things that have helped people connect, have helped people connect to opportunities, to each other, to grow, to network, and to understand the potential that exists. However, this progressive nature of technological intervention has been very different for the marginalized and for the majority and the privileged communities. So I think taking one side of the story is in the end detrimental to how policies are operationalized and developed to ensure that there is equality in the development, equality in the opportunity that technology is offering to people in Pakistan. If you take the example of what has been happening in within the health sector during COVID, all of us who are living in urban centers have the privilege and access to technology, to mobile devices. Just linked to healthcare, we have been able to access e-health services. All the hospitals have offered these services. We have been able to connect to doctors. We have been able to connect to whatever services we need or whatever information we needed. At the same time, either the lack of access to technology or the lack of digital media information literacy or the lack of understanding about how, let's say, women in rural areas, in suburban areas, will feel comfortable connecting to these services online. That has kind of widened the divide that exists, and in the end exaggerated and exacerbated the effects that the digital divide already has. So I think just looking at the triggers that happen, same goes for education. We have seen students protesting across the country, not just in Waziristan, let's say, or Balochistan or other regions, but even in larger cities, where the access to online classes has been difficult for students, and it has been difficult for them to equally access whatever resources universities were able to offer. So just looking very basically from these two development viewpoints, what I see is, yes, there is development, there is movement towards alternatives that technology can offer. We have seen that this is cheaper. E-health has been cheaper than doctors sitting in a clinic and running it. It's cheaper, it's more accessible to people who are able to access it. So for it to become something, for technology to become a tool that benefits citizens of Pakistan equally, we need to kind of look at all these different power structures, whether they're cultural. So, men of the family having more access to devices or controlling the financial resources that they have, paying for the internet devices. The question of literacy itself, how different people within families are equipped to deal with information, to deal with applications that technology brings to them, plus then the larger geographical, regional wise infrastructural divide that exists. So for that inequality, unless I think that inequality is addressed through policy making and through effective implementation of whatever policies are there, because we know that USF exists and other all these government structures exist on paper, and it looks like the policies have been thought through, at least from their objectives. But when it comes to implementation, when it comes to operationalization, and specifically looking at the kind of detail that Mubariz was mentioning, for example, I think there is a huge lack in how people are able to benefit from technological access. I think that's the key that we need to look at in terms of governance, specifically in order for Pakistan to kind of achieve its potential. I think it's not just access to technology that we have to enable, but we also have to look at all the different factors that affect the use of technology, whether it's resources, financial, whether it's cultural barriers, women feeling unsafe connecting to devices, whether it's the fear of surveillance in areas that are deemed more sensitive, or whether it's the lack of integration from public and private bodies. सो मुबसर ने पहले एग्जांपल दी थी कि वो वहाँ पे कार्ड आप आई थिंक कोलाची में वो कैश नहीं करा सकते, अपने कार्ड से चार्ज नहीं करा सकते, एंड एटीएम लगा हुआ है, राइट? सो ऑल दीज फैक्टर्स they kind of come together to create an environment where there is a bubble of people who are benefiting a lot from technology, but then there is another huge part of your population who are just not enabled and who are further disenfranchised because of the fact कि जो लोग ऑलरेडी प्रिविलेज हैं उनके पास एक्सेस और उनके पास अपॉर्चुनिटीज टू डेवलप वो फर्दर बढ़ता जा रहा है. सो आई फील दैट दिस डिवाइड इज समथिंग दैट्स रियली सेंट्रल एंड एसेंशियल दैट वी नीड टू लुक एट.
Thank you for that, Sadaf. आपने काफी सारी, that was quite a intervention that packed in many, many things. I'd like to direct the question to you again. देखिए, digital divide we accept in Pakistan as well as South Asia, but technology is also thought of something that generates its own solutions. And the hope is that, as more and more people come into the fintech space, as more and more people come online or have access to tech, these problems will go away. Is this true? Can you dispel this myth? Is it a myth? आप बताइए.
So yes, I think यहाँ पे जो problem है ना, this myth or this assumption comes from a very global north perspective. जहाँ पे what I feel the approach is that these issues are very centric to the lack of infrastructure, and maybe वो जो पूरा women empowerment वाला scenario आता है, and even that similar models are applied to marginalized, that the lack of use is simply based in the fact कि provision नहीं है, and once आप resource provide करना शुरू कर दो तो लोग automatically connect हो जाएंगे. I don't feel that the same model can apply to a society like Pakistan, because like a very disconnected example would be polio vaccine. It's not that people don't have access to the vaccine क्योंकि उनके पास पैसे नहीं है. They are not using the vaccine because of all these other cultural issues, the disinformation that's spread out there. I know this is a disconnected example, but I think this a similar example would apply to technology. We see that the policy making, especially अगर आप पीका की बात कर लें, even जो protective regimes create होती हैं, I think they're a bit divorced from the reality that exists through other laws and through the cultural social constraints that we exist in. And within that what happens is you do provide access to technology, and बहुत सारी experimentation we have, women only accelerators बन गए, but then women only accelerators are only creating products that are targeting to a women only market who have the least amount of financial resources to spend. So इस तरह की जो सारी जो ये segregation है, I think ये all the behavioral issues, all the socio-economic issues that have created inequalities in the society, I think they multiply when technology comes into play, because it's easy to adapt, and as you said, it offers its own solution. So if people who are able to make better use of it very quickly make so much better use of it, that people who have to catch up have a long way to catch up in. जो बेनजीर income support program था, what's it called now, एहसास program. So I remember when it was introduced, उसके अंदर एक course था Coral Draw का, and they had multiple technology based courses. All the technologies were completely obsolete, and I don't understand if a lot of public spending is going there towards educating people in technology that is completely obsolete. And ये हमने देखा है कि ज़्यादातर जो गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से interventions जो introduce होती हैं in the name of tackling the digital divide, creating a more equitable field for people, they often rely on technologies जो local market में भी नहीं compete कर सकते, but specifically in the international market, because as soon as you come to the digital, then you're competing with something that's far more bigger than the bubble we are operating in. So I think our inability to acknowledge these issues, that these inequalities do have an impact, and these inequalities kind of, and their impact kind of goes beyond just infrastructural access, yeah, even affordability of the internet, of the devices, of the technology. I think yeah, automatically technology will not offer a solution. Yes, things might improve, like obviously अगर चीज़ें digitize हो जाएंगी गवर्नमेंट के end पे, तो थोड़ी सी speed बढ़ जाएगी चीज़ों की, right? But in the end आपको पास आप data access कर लेंगे, लेकिन then you'll have to rely on somebody else to kind of fill out that form, जो visa forms में हमने देखा है लोगों का. So unless you look at digital media information literacy, creating addressing these power imbalances that affect people's uses of technology in ways that are different than just access. अगर मैं for example किसी भी sensitive area में use कर रही हूँ पाकिस्तान के, my fear of being surveilled will affect how I actually access technology. And I'm not just talking about surveillance from the state. People might fear being surveilled by their parents or their brothers, gender के context में, if you think about it. So I do think that it's a bit more complex than just कि हर जगह टेक्नोलॉजी फैला दें, वरना अगर ये इतना इजी होता तो if you look at like जो misinformation disorder है, and in 2016 I think World Economic Forum's report said that misinformation is going to be an issue for human societies themselves. It is based on the fact कि media information literacy नहीं है. So just technology को spread कर देना and उसकी outreach access बढ़ा देना without enabling your population to understand it, to understand its implications, and to best make use of it, I don't think it's going to just work like a magic pill and lead to something like utopia type जो हमारे जहन में scenario आता है. Yeah. So yeah, I don't agree with that 100%.
Thank you for that very comprehensive intervention. Usama, I'd like to come to you. Sadaf said that we need to equip our populations with the skills, the psychology, and notwithstanding the infrastructure, etc. All of that. So, those are concerns that those are things that develop over time. I don't want to talk about the infrastructure so much. Others have spoken about it, but about the skills and the psychology and the personality to use technology and to be able to keep up with it is also a concern that is emerging from this discussion. आप बताइए इसके बारे में. What do you think? This is, as I understand, not a problem for the government but for the society.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's also this fear of technology. So a few years back, I was, training this group of women entrepreneurs in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and it was a basic training on it was a training on WordPress, so how to set up a blog or a website. And essentially, setting up a blog or a website on WordPress is as easy as setting up, I don't know, a Facebook account or something, right? You just log in and put in your data, connect it to your email, and you have a website or a blog. Actually, I set up my own blog as a child accidentally. I thought I was sending my blog post to a platform, and it ended up publishing my own blog, and that's how I learned how to use these blogs. So in that training, the reaction I got from everyone was, "Bas, itna hi karna hai, ho gaya." Right? So and then girls also said कि वो मेरा भाई तो कहता है कि वेबसाइट बनाना बहुत मुश्किल होता है, उसमें बहुत टाइम लगता है, उसमें आपने ये करना होता है, वो करना होता है. So what I'm trying to get at is that a lot of times it's just it's this fear we have of doing something, and because we don't have access to, like Sadaf very said very well, when you don't have that media and information literacy, you create this monster out of technology in your head, which you find so inaccessible in your head, but when you functionally do it, it's so easy. So in that sense, I think there's a critical lack of understanding of what technology is, how it works, how easy is it to use, and because of that, a lot of people are reluctant to adopt it. And I think as far as skills are concerned, that yes, so in our computer classes, what are we teaching? So in most government schools, if you go, say in Punjab, you will have a computer lab which will be locked. and no one's using it. So kids aren't even being taught how to use computers, and I've seen this myself. And then even if they are, then what are they learning, right? They're probably just learning how to ये motherboard है, ये hardware है, इसमें जो है CD डलती है, just stuff like that. But people are not being taught, अच्छा internet क्या है, उस पे search कैसे करते हैं, how do you access services, how do you open a website, and stuff like that. People are not able to do. So I think that's also a major thing. And then when it comes to say using social media, and it's something Nighat touched upon earlier as well, people don't know what the privacy settings are, and that ends up landing people in a lot of trouble as well. So I think it's just there's a lot of work to do on media and information literacy and how you can use technology to do simple things. And then, of course, we have that perception that the internet is only used for bad things, and the prime minister isn't really helping. Kal keh rahenge TikTok ki wajah se fahashi beh rahi hai society, right? So when you make statements like that, you're not really providing leadership on encouraging people to use technology, but you're demonizing it for the public. And that perception that seeps through, especially when it's coming from the prime minister. So instead, why doesn't the prime minister make a TikTok account and talk to people about not doing fahashi on it instead of saying, oh, monitor it and block it, right? So like Sadaf earlier said that the approach has been, and I think Anoosha also mentioned this, that the approach has been over regulation and banning rather than letting people know the uses of technology and how you can use it safely. And I think there's a critical lack of leadership in that from the government as well.
Then, Anoosha, is the question about integration even the right one to ask? Is it ask a question about integration in societies that are so patchy and at odds in their ability to utilize or have enthusiasm for technology? There's parts of Pakistan, as Mubariz said, that are creating in the international economy, and there's a whole different set of issues that apply. There's a part of Pakistan that's agitating against laws, and of course the government is not helping. There's a part of Pakistan that's fearful of technology and its uses. Isme fahashi hai, isme वगैरह, all of those issues. There's also a part of Pakistan that is locked out because it doesn't have that kind of access to tech to improve their lives. Then is there any realistic question about integrating or moderating these different tendencies?
Right. So, what I want to add to that is, again, if we go back to, the human rights context, I have been delivering trainings to the police, to the prosecutors on basic human rights, because we did that a very long time ago. Basic human rights यही है आपकी first generation rights, the right to life, the right not to be tortured, the freedom of speech. So these are first generation rights, right? So when it comes to the internet, having access to the internet and having digital rights and having, all these technology based rights and duties, those fall under like maybe fourth or fifth generation rights. तो एक कंट्री जहाँ पे आप लोगों को अभी भी फर्स्ट जनरेशन राइट्स में टीच कर रहे हो कि किसी की कंसेंट के बगैर उसको हाथ नहीं लगाना, you cannot kill someone, you have a duty to not hurt someone, you have a duty not to steal. So in that kind of society, imagine telling them that you cannot take my photo off the internet, and they're just going to laugh at you. They'll be like, it wasn't you weren't familiar with the privacy settings, so it's your loss. This is the kind of attitude that the society has. So us context mein dekha jaye to of course it seems like first world problem maybe, but जिस तरह सारे speakers ने बात की, I would tend to take a slightly different approach than them. They've all talked about about the society having the responsibility or taking the onus about becoming more digitally literate, and being more aware of the nuances or the implications of their use of technology and the use of social media. I would still like to put the onus on the governments and the state. This is their responsibility. देखें, दुनिया की सारी developed countries में यही फर्क है. What the European Union is doing is that जो cases आते हैं at a, since they regulate all their member states, तो जो European court के पास cases आते हैं, what they do is they tend to protect the citizens. They make it incumbent upon the government to provide dispute resolution platforms. They make it mandatory upon the technology companies to display their privacy settings in a way that is understandable to the common citizen. They make it compulsory for governments and technology companies and these social media platforms to inform their citizens of what they're signing up for. So citizens always have a choice. The element of consent is very important. They always have a choice to opt in. So if they don't want to opt in, they still shouldn't be left behind. They shouldn't be marginalized or ostracized just because they're not using a certain platform. So you still have to make everything available and accessible to them. अब पाकिस्तान में जो बाहर के मुल्कों में यही है कि as far as let's say legal tech is concerned or e-courts are concerned, you have to send notices to all the parties so that they can respond to the allegations or complaints against them. So what they do is they develop QR codes. They ask their intelligence agencies to assist them with identifying metadata in an email where they can find out if somebody has received a notice and is not purposely trying to get out of it. पाकिस्तान ने क्या solution निकाला है कि WhatsApp पे अगर हम भेजेंगे तो that will constitute as the notice has been received. So that will constitute as receipt of notice. Now, me being a digital migrant, I want to have that agency and that choice of downloading an app and being allowed and enabled to and not being judged for it कि मैं ये app क्यों नहीं use करी, हमने तो आपको WhatsApp वाले number पे भेज दिया था. Now that is my choice. It is my choice whether I want to download that app or not. It is my choice whether I turn on the read receipts that feature on that app or not. It is my choice at the end of the day, and the government can't force me to download something or be part of something. इसी तरह ये जो digital natives हैं or like people who have completely skipped learning more about the latest couple of generations, वो ये समझते हैं कि WhatsApp से सारे काम उनके हो जाएंगे. That is not true. इस तरह की जो चीजें हैं वो it's the responsibility of the policymakers, the state, to ensure that they have these enabling policies and principles and accountability mechanisms in place so that nobody is left behind. So the approach should be leave no one behind, and it should not be incumbent upon the citizens to ensure that they are digitally literate. अब यही जिस तरह our tax filing platform जो FBR ने बनाया है, the Federal Board of Revenue has this platform called IRIS. Now it's supposed to be very easy to use, but I simply cannot. मैं जितनी मर्जी tech expert बन जाऊं, I simply cannot use it without the help of an accountant. I just cannot. I do not understand what some of the words mean. I do not understand what the legal implication of some of the features is. I do not understand what they're asking of me, which documents I have to upload. And at the end of the day, I do not even understand the technology platform. Now, the accountant tells me that you're supposed to double click on this, that's how it gets refreshed, and you're supposed to double click on that. So these are the kind of things now that they are helpful, that they have a helpline in place. If you're stuck on something, you can just call up the FBR helpline and they will tell you how to go about it. But the whole point of frontier technologies is frontier technologies there is less human contact. You have to be emancipated enough to use that platform on your own. That's what the ultimate goal should be. कि एक citizen खुद on their own जाके एक platform या एक app या कोई feature इस्तेमाल कर सके without assistance. All, of course, assistance should be there, but don't shift the onus onto the citizen that they have to do what's best for them and they should know better. ये पहले even in buying and selling transactions, law की पहले approach यही थी that the buyer has to be aware, but the approach has shifted over time. That buyers they're reasonable people. They should not be expected to know everything. It's a power dynamic, and within this power dynamic, the person who is in a position of power, which is like the seller or the state or the technology company or the social media platform, they should be the ones making things more accessible and easier for people to understand. So, yeah.
I think our moderator is no longer online.
Yeah. No, Anusha, I completely agree with what you were saying. I didn't mean to say कि citizens का काम है क्या वो करें. It's the policy that's failing, obviously, and
Yeah,
the
no,
kind of
not disagreeing, but just saying that,
yeah.
even the law has taken the approach that, we shouldn't be putting everything onto the citizen. State should bear the responsibility, and the technology company, because they're in a position of power, of course.
I think the state also kind of in Pakistan is completely failing to build the right narrative for this by what Sama was saying, creating the technology and companies to be some sort of a monster and not just fahashi ke element ke andar. I was in this meeting in a Senate meeting actually, and one of the government. I don't want to name anyone because yeah, it's the time of self censorship. But somebody from the government, a representative of the government, actually said that technology should be used essentially and primarily to spread the message of Islam and love for Islam and Pakistan, and people who do so, whether through blogs or through these positive blogging or Twitter accounts, should be compensated and incentivized by the government. And this was happening within the parliament. So if the government takes the approach that technology in a sense is just an image building tool, and somehow that's the key element that's there, and every other use is somehow impure, whether whether even if it's just using technology to book for your food or cars. We have always heard these critical remarks about how technology is breathtaking and whatnot. So the pre-existing biases within the society within which these power imbalances are inbuilt, किसने बात करनी है, किसने decision लेनी है, इज्जत किसकी होगी. The state is completely failing to create a counter narrative to that, and they're adding to a narrative which pushes technology to a demonized state and something that's so unsafe that only those with power or those who we perceive to be better able to make better decisions for themselves, obviously who are not marginalized, who are usually male heads of the family, they are better able to use these resources. I think even within the narratives, not just through formal policy making, we are failing the citizens, and we are failing to create a society which finds itself excited to actually explore the potentials that technology has to offer. Welcome back, moderators.
Thank you. I managed to kick myself out of the studio. Thank you. But I'd like to, move into a part of the conversation that is about South Asia, and the idea that I've tried to explore over, the last hour is the idea of integration. We haven't veered into the other aspects of technology, but integration is, and I'm hearing what you have said over the course of this conversation. I'm thinking that integration becomes something very, very difficult. Perhaps only some parts of our society might be able to integrate internationally. Perhaps only some parts of our society might be able to have transfer skills internally, or be able to sell, or be able to learn from societies or cultures elsewhere. In South Asia, I do know that technology has enabled a kind of friction with India, friction with Afghanistan, We have created perhaps more hatred in online forums, etc. But moving away from that, have we been able to learn? And I'd like to throw this question at Mubariz. Have we been able to learn anything from India, from our increased use of technology, from Bangladesh, from our ability to integrate with other South Asian partners? Has technology promoted this as a positive for Pakistan at all?
Well, I generally truly believe that we have to solve for our problems ourselves, right? We can always take inspiration, we can learn from our neighbors, people around us, close to us, but essentially our problems are still slightly unique. At least their solutions would be unique to us because we have a generally different setup around those things. But it will stem from policy, right? It'll stem from our decision to learn, and it'll be stem from our decision to achieve a certain outcome. Um, if our outcome is that all of Pakistan should be digital, I think we can learn a lot from Reliance in India, where they distribute a free internet, etc. And I'm sure there's a lot of things that are wrong with that, and there are a lot of things that can be improved in that model as well. But essentially, we need to make that decision first. We need to take that initiative, and we need to incentivize the situation where most of Pakistan is digital. When we talk about integration with Southeast Asia, we'll only integrate if we're doing things that are of mutual interest. We What else are they going to integrate on to like to police Halime's clothes on Instagram to what, like we have to be doing things. We have to be doing uh, we have to incentivize ambition. We have to incentivize people, or even when you talk about businesses, to go and do things that are regional and that are not just for Pakistan. I'll take Kareem as an example. If Kareem is one of the founders is Pakistani. If that can be a big regional play, you can change the way a lot of countries in the region behave. That's what we need, and we cannot be shutting down or taking our arts and cultures, etc., lightly. K-pop brings billions of dollars in revenue for South Korea every year. And by billions, I mean literally billions. It's like, I think, around $3 to $4 billion in revenue from K-pop to South Korea. That's not a joke. Vietnam is again a brilliant example of a country that has turned itself around from COVID handling to literally everything. The economic indicators are very, very good. Their exports are much higher than us as well. Integration is cooperation, and where most cooperation happens on economic and transactional level. Um, it's anecdotally, the very famously, the Chinese ambassador once, when all the businessmen were telling him that why don't you import from Pakistan, he told them, you guys don't make anything, like make anything for us to import and we will import it. We'd be happy to do it. So what we need to incentivize is literally builders, people who will start building things, and not houses. If you're going to incentivize investment and resources towards housing. Sure, there are other industries attached that will benefit, but the house itself is not generating anything new. We need to incentivize manufacturing. We need to incentivize people who will now be building things that we can either not import from abroad, so import substitution, or export. So that's how I see, whether it's a digital good, whether it's technology that's helping us make bio goods. Netherlands exports agricultural produce worth $100 billion a year, and we are a large agrarian economy. They have snow in half the country, during half the year, but they're doing $100 billion worth of exports of just agricultural produce. So, if you're telling me technology cannot help you do that, then you're not thinking that far. So, eh, for me, integration is cooperation and working together, and we can only work together if we are also bringing something useful to the table. And that's what we need to incentivize. We have a young population which can go on and build things. Just incentivize the builders, not the construction sort, but the actual people who will build things that people across the world need.
I'm glad you termed it like that. Sama, I'd like to pitch this question to you. What are we bringing to the table as a country? And that's, you can be as arbitrary as you like about this in terms of goods or services or ideas. what are we bringing to the international table? What are we bringing to the South Asian table? Of course, one good example I can think of is Coke Studio, which sells and sells quite well, and it's mobilized soft power for us and brought diplomatic goodies for us as well. But what else are we putting on the table? I am not sure as a Pakistani if we really have much in the case. But over to you, Usama.
No, absolutely. There's in entertainment, we have our drama industry that became very big in the region. I have friends from Nepal, Bangladesh, India, Afghanistan who sing, Coke Studio and who love watching Fawad and Myra on TV. And cricket, I think sports is a big thing, but as far as, what we're talking about, it's tricky. So, in terms of Sorry, what was your question? I got distracted by discussing Fawad and Myra and Cook Studio.
My question was, what do we bring to the South Asian table and the international table credibly that can be picked up as an export? It can even be an idea. What does Pakistani integration really stand for?
Honestly, I can't think of much. And this was one question that, beginning of the year, they tried to bring web TV and over-the-top TV under Pembra's purview. And, a bunch of us, I think Sadaf was also there. We were at the Senate Human Rights Committee speaking about this. And, they kept saying, oh, there's Indian content on Netflix that we're able to access. And that's where I got very frustrated, and I said, okay, yeah, there's Indian content on Netflix, but there's also Pakistani content on Netflix. So whereas the Indians have blocked, Pakistani content from their TV channels, Indian audiences are free to watch Pakistani content on Netflix. And if you look, and then just to play to their gallery, I said, ISPR production War is on Netflix that Indians can watch. So why don't you make more stuff that has that soft power that can reach audiences and use Netflix to your advantage rather than trying to regulate it and trying to get rid of content on Netflix that you don't want Pakistanis to watch. Put content that you want Indians and others to watch through that platform. And I think that sort of thinking is very rare in Pakistan, I would say, because it's just like try to protect your borders, but not think of what can you take beyond your borders to others. And I think that's the sort of approach that we need. So I think Mubariz put it very well when he mentioned Kareem, and he was like, okay, that's like a major export that we have. Um, uh, from Pakistan, from a Pakistani startup founder. And I think there's the Atoms shoe company that started off as hometown shoes in Pakistan, and now it's a Silicon Valley shoe company. And what were they able to do? They're able to first connect Pakistani artisans that created shoes in Okara with the market, and slowly they scaled, and then they became this like multi-million dollar company based in Silicon Valley. But why did they have to leave Pakistan, and why did they have to go to the US to set up this company? These are the questions that our government should be asking, right? And at the same time, our textile exports have also really suffered. A lot of Pakistani companies and industries have now set up industry in Bangladesh because of the lack of infrastructure. You don't have gas, you don't have electricity. How are you supposed to produce more, and how are you supposed to enter the markets? The European Union gave us GSP plus status, but what have we done with it to increase our exports, right? Have we really scaled our exports? Have we really tried to increase the production? I was reading somewhere that we really haven't taken advantage of that because we really haven't supported the industry to grow. And I think we've talked enough about the tech sector where this constant banning and blocking is impacting the ease of doing business for technology companies in Pakistan. If your AWS servers are slowing down, if VPNs have to be registered, some of them are being blocked. If even CDNs have to be blocked by ISPs, then your internet would be slow and no one is going to want to work. And yes, other like Sandvine with the web monitoring system, you're slowing down the internet further in the name of security, in the name of surveillance. So it's like we're trying to become the surveillance state that China is, but we're not trying to become the state that's producing so much that China is also. And I think that's where our priorities have to change.
Anoosha, would you like to comment on the same question as to the quality of Pakistan's integration? And I'd like to refer this to Sadaf as well, and with that, closing thoughts thereafter. Ji,
So, just to be clear, by integration you mean how we're integrating technology within the region, or how we're doing it within the
So
country
both, but
itself?
leading from Mubariz's thought that what is Pakistan's value even in being able to become a credible global player. We've talked about how the problems of technology, but when dealing with the idea of integration is what is the quality of integration? Also, are we just a leech on the international system? Drawing in skills, etc., etc. And to put it very sort of uncharitably, or are we actually in a position to offer something to the world?
That's quite mean.
It
That's
is for
that's a
sure.
very mean thing to say. We're not leeches. No, we're not leeches at all. As far as it's not all bad news. So, the unique thing about Pakistan is that we have an increasing youth population. So over 60% of our population is comprised of young people who are about to enter the workforce very soon. This has an advantage over other countries because they have they have given so many facilities and so much good quality healthcare to everybody that now they have an aging population, so their people aren't just dying off. So हमें इस चीज का ये फायदा है population का कि हमारी youth population it's we have a youth bulge as far as South Asia is concerned, and that can be leveraged on international platforms because most of our people, since we don't have jobs or employment opportunities for them, so like Mubariz said, most of our people can be trained to become manufacturers and entrepreneurs and freelancers. Or जो भी ये सारी freelance websites हैं, you see most of the people who are on them are Pakistanis essentially. So we as far as our education setup is concerned, so I'm not going to go into the details of like the quality of it, but as far as the legal side is concerned, at least our education has been Eurocentric for 70 years, and our official language has been English for like since our inception. So that gives us an edge over other South Asian nations because we are able to communicate more effectively on international platforms. Even diplomatically, we may not have a lot of diplomatic muscle in the US, for example, but and because I've worked with the US government on different initiatives, वो खुद कहते हैं कि it's easier to talk to Pakistani diplomats and representatives than the Indian ones because they understand what we're talking about. So we are very politically, हमारा political acumen is better than the other South Asian nations as well, which can be proved to be of benefit to us. और जैसे कि young population है, so that we can leverage that into getting a lot of benefits and aid from other developed nations for our population as well, and as far as their manufacturing or startup initiatives are concerned, because they're raising a lot of capital internationally as well. So ये एक चीज है. Secondly, as far as technology is concerned, what we keep forgetting is that Pakistan is in a very unique position geographically as well. So जहाँ तक internet की penetration की और accessibility की बात आती है, we have been largely dependent on sea cables and fiber optic cables for the provision of internet services. But what we keep forgetting is, and what the government is not focusing on right now is that we have a space program that's set to launch in the year 2040, and we haven't done a lot of work in that regard. So जो स्पेस प्रोग्राम है उसमें जो सैटेलाइट इंटरनेट कनेक्टिविटी है that can play a huge role in increasing our rate of penetration of internet within the country and to our neighboring countries as well, who are still dependent on sea cables right now. So Pakistan की एक ऐसी unique position है within the region that it can be a good um, a good focal point of all these internet-based services, especially space telecom. फिर हमारी unique position के लिए, we're near the equator as well. So हम China के neighbors भी हैं. So we're pretty much dependent on a lot of satellite technology के लिए on China. So वो हमारा एक neighborhood जो being within the region can benefit not only us but to the world as well, because not everybody, especially the US and other countries, not everybody wants to deal directly with China because they're competitors. फिर इसी तरह है कि because of our equatorial position, we're in a good geographical space to have low orbital satellites. So ये cheaper satellites we can have in order to provide connectivity to not just Pakistan but to the entire South Asian region as well, if we allow them to be placed within our jurisdiction. फिर इसी तरह है कि we have a lot of implementation issues as far as our laws are concerned, but this country has had good lawyers and policymakers and good statesmen over a period of time. तो हमारे laws कोई बहुत बुरे उस तरह से नहीं बने हुए कि हम उनको we can't benefit from them. So as far as technology is concerned, वो तो हमने खुद बनाई भी नहीं है. We've sort of copied them from other countries as well. So the approach is not all that bad. We can still salvage a lot of it and we can improve upon it. So policies अच्छी बनी हुई हैं. अगर उनको हम अच्छे तरीके से implement करें, given our unique position and our unique economic features and our markets, then I think we're in a really good position to take this forward. और इसी तरह CPEC is very unique to us as well. CPEC के through जो technology transfer agreements sign होंगी, सबसे ज़्यादा technology agreements sign होती हैं in the telecom sector. And the most patents are filed by Samsung and Apple. Google की बहुत सारे legal issues होते हैं. So एक और जो बहुत एक key player है in the technology contract area is CPEC. क्योंकि CPEC के थ्रू हमने बहुत सारी agreement sign की हैं जिससे China हमें transfer करेगा technology. And those will involve a lot of intellectual property issues as well, and it will have a lot of intelligence sharing as well. So ये जो contracts हैं ये I think we हमारे जो lawyers हैं वो एक तो they're not all that bad, I would like to say, especially those who are working on in the field of technology. So ये I think अच्छी agreements काफी निकल सकती हैं, and the South Asian region can actually take lessons from them and they can actually use them as best practices. जो हम CPEC के थ्रू ये सारे contractual agreements sign करेंगे और थोड़ी कर भी चुके हैं. Special economic zones बन रहे हैं, e-commerce के लिए बहुत सारी चीजें adopt की जा रही हैं. So digital payments के लिए भी जो है it's हमने PayPal वगैरह तो we weren't able to sort of adopt them, but at least we know that there are people who can develop these systems, develop localized systems as well. So intellectual capital की कमी नहीं है. I think it's just a matter of having a good policymaker and a good person at the helm of affairs who can take this forward.
Thank you for that. And that was a great list of things that we can, Papa John's as well. Uh, thanks, Osama. I'd like, concluding thoughts. We've almost run out of time. Sadaf, I'd like to quickly refer this to you and then on to Mubariz. Sadaf, what would your concluding thoughts be after, that great laundry list provided by Anoosha on where all Pakistan can win? Do you see, any opportunities in tech for Pakistan?
So I wish I shared the same optimistic perspective. The main question for me, like everything you are listing, they are just potentials, and this potential cannot be tapped into unless there is more transparency, unless there is a demonstrated will to change from the directions that we have been taking. So, for example, you mentioned CPEC, which obviously could have been a huge opportunity, and obviously it will add a lot to the economy of Pakistan. But I see no consideration for business and human rights, for balancing business and human rights. The operations, the plan, everything is not transparent. And then when you think about like importing Chinese technology, we know globally that Chinese technology is synonymous with furthering surveillance, with furthering state control. We know that given the political, geopolitical relationships that China has with other countries in the nation, India specifically, it's likely to further create Pakistan's, it's likely to create Pakistan's image as more of a threat, rather than an opportunity that other countries can bank upon. In terms of youth, I do feel that unless there is like a huge reform within the education sector, which kind of enables the youth to think critically and explore their own potential, we are going to be carrying a baggage that we are not able to support for ourselves. So far, what I see within Technology Institute themselves, there is a much much greater leaning on even young people following what's already happening. There is not enough encouragement for risk taking, and people and entrepreneurs who are coming forward and the startups that are being made are people who can afford to take risks. Essentially, they are not enabled. The system doesn't support them as a larger part of the population. So I think banking upon just the numbers at this point is a bit risky. I do feel that the points you have mentioned, I hope that the government actually takes them into consideration and sees how we actually use these assets, because the direction we are going in right now, I fear that these assets will turn into baggage rather than assets in the coming future. But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to leave on a bad note here. I do feel that there is an increasing discourse that itself would add to more. There is a more rigorous civil society voice, and even though there's self censorship and all that, but we have never seen before, such deals coming into government, whether it's through on the e-commerce policy or the regulatory mechanisms, whether they come together to create enough pressure, that's something else. But I do feel there's more recognition of the fact that these things have to be sorted out. Technology itself has to be seen as a core component where business and human rights concerns have to be balanced together. So I'm hoping that this discourse itself will create a momentum eventually, where we start moving towards a direction in which we benefit ourselves as well and begin to offer something to the world.
Thank you for that. Mubariz, the last word is yours. Between setting directions in the future and between realistic assessments of whether governments will allow us to meet our potential, what is your view on Pakistan being able to chart a course in technology for itself?
Well, I think Sadaf really hit the nail on the head when she said uh, the risk-taking appetite is limited to a certain privileged class, and which is absolutely true. Um, the only thing that has changed recently is that it has never been easier to start a business in Pakistan before, primarily because before technology businesses, and I'll come to that, before technology businesses, um, people did not invest in people, like, because investment in an early stage business is an investment in the person who's founding the business, who's going to build the business. And if tomorrow he leaves for a job in Dubai, the business is gone, and as an investor you're just sitting there, right? You don't really have and I think Anoosha has highlighted this earlier as well, your contractual enforcement in courts is also weak. It takes time, and your likelihood of getting any damages out of it is very low. This is finally changing, where you have institutionalized capital available for someone who wants to start a business. The reason why tech business is more lucrative is because its ability to grow really fast. If I'm selling software online, I can sell 5,000 or 5 million. My cost base would not substantially increase. I would just need a few more engineers and the cloud storage to be able to scale a software as a service platform online. So that's the promise that it has held, and that's what's changing with the new funds coming in, etc. But still, we do not have access to capital for a majority of the. We don't even have proper banking for majority of Pakistanis, and a lot of that needs to change. Uh, uh, if the government of Pakistan wants Pakistanis to build things that the world wants, or build things that they want for themselves and to meet their own demand, I think what needs to change is incentivization for investing in people, where people can go on and build things. Now, whether that investment is from the government, it just doesn't have to be courses online to be. I mean, that's, of course, that's upskilling and that's important, but there's a lot of other areas where investment is required. Uh, Even just building a road, and it's not just about building a road; it's about providing mobility. Which comes to my second thing, that I think things can substantially improve if we are obsessed with outcomes uh, as opposed to just the means that reach us to that outcome. So, for example, just the road. Over in Pakistan, the typical standard politician picture would be on that road and talk about how you built a motorway. But if you're gonna tell women that you can't travel on it after 11 p.m. or 10 p.m. or 8 p.m., that doesn't serve the purpose. The desired outcome of a road is mobility. It's not just to build the road. And if mobility is not allowed, or substantially hampered, then you haven't achieved that outcome. So, if we are focused on outcomes, and if our outcomes are documentation of the economy, integration in the world, selling to the world, and economically working with the world, then that's what we need to focus on. And technology is a tool that can help us achieve that, but it is not the end. It is not all about tech business. It's not about just technology. It's about reaching those outcomes. So I'm hopeful to quite an extent that this is an opportunity, whether we'll take it or not, or whether it's about taking a lot of right decisions. Of course, there'll be wrong decisions, but it's about taking generally more right decisions than wrong decisions. And I think we are lucky to be in a position where we can substantially benefit from this particular moment in time because of the whole geopolitical situation around us. So yeah, so I'm hopeful that we will. Uh, Whether I would put some money on it, I don't know. But I mean, my bet is that I'm going long on Pakistan. I mean, everyone who's here, working here, and trying to make something of themselves in Pakistan is taking a bet on Pakistan. So in that aspect, I would say that that there's hope. But let's see if we actually end up taking those right decisions.
I think hope is always fantastic to have, but hedging bets is always. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. We may just end up publishing this online. Usama is going to moderate a second a webinar which starts at 2 o'clock. So if anybody is interested in joining that, I'd like to extend this invitation right now. There's other colleagues from tech who are joining that conversation. But this was a very robust conversation, packed in a lot. There were fantastic sound bites that my colleagues have taken note of, as well as being full of perspective. I'm just struck, as somebody who operates in another policy domain, that there is so much perspective among practitioners. We will get back with more questions if we have to, and engage you in further conversations down the line. But thank you very, very much for joining us today, and hope to meet you another time.
Thank you. Share the link for the next,
Thank you.
so that if I can drop by, I'd love to drop by.
Will do for sure. Will do for sure. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks for having us.